expertise requires that you're in the details. You know the nuances. You know when something works and you know when something breaks.
The VTEX they started, the first one was 70 people and one sponsor. I call a friend and say, look, man, I need support. Like, we need to unify the industry. So I call personally the 70 people. See, we need to talk the same language. We need to talk in a unified language because Brazil needs to be an industry.
Yeah.
And if each company just say like different things about internet, we'll not be an industry, and we're going to be strong if we are an industry. And they came. The second one, we invited 200 people and pops up 400.
Oh, wow.
And then it was a mess. Then we came up to the moment that we achieved like the peak where we invited the President Barack Obama. So the President Barack Obama was in the office when we invited him.
Amazing.
Yes. And he accepted. And it still today is the biggest corporate stage that Obama has ever been. It's a 10,000 people stage, the one that you were. So, and people ask why we did that. Just because it seems to be impossible. And, you know, like Brazilians, as is Brazil's enormous, they feel that, no, Brazil's too big, let's stay here. But actually, it's enormous geographically.
Yeah.
But in terms of GDP, it's pretty like small. So I am one of the enthusiasts to say, like, let's claim the authority that we do have here, the talent, the brand that I call the engineer in Brazil, the engineer in Latin America, is one of the safe engineer in the world because it's a region that we don't know war. There is like a protected area that every company can put their offices here on engineer, and it's going to be stable. So it's a great opportunity. You are seeing how powerful this event is. Just an expression of the ecosystem. So it's really interesting, and I'm very thankful that you came.
Oh,
where are you based?
Thanks for inviting me. I'm from Ottawa, Canada. Nobody ever visits Ottawa, Canada.
No, they go for Vancouver better, right?
Yeah, Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal.
Yeah.
For now, though, Brazil feels like really good, though. I've only been here 24 hours, but it feels good.
You told me yesterday you went to the Paulista, where they close and you just walk.
Yeah, that was incredible just to see everybody outside and enjoying life. And every 100 feet or so, somebody was playing music or dancing, or I was like, wow, I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember one day I invited an analyst from US. And the analyst was, no, I have been in corporate events before. It's the same. And I say, please come, it's different. And then the analyst came, he stopped me at the corridor of the event and say, Mariano, why did you tell me that's different? I said, I told you. And so, yeah. Okay, let's jump in a more kind of a contextual questions. Your presentation here, the book. One thing that caught me on the book, and you mentioned here as well, is what I'm going to summarize as emotional mastery.
Yeah.
VTEX has 10 principles, and one of the principles has the sense of emotional mastery. And informed by the future on AI, I believe the world will need more emotional mastery. How do you see the importance of emotional mastery in your life? In your activities, how you see the company and the world ready to actually balance these overhype or hyper-hype trend of AI? Tell me more about emotional mastery.
I think emotions are one of those things where we tend not to think. And so if you look at us, we're humans, but we're also animals. And one of the differences between humans and animals is that we have the ability to reason before we respond. And when we're emotional, whether it be anger or even in love, sometimes we tend to do things without reasoning. And so how do we recognize these situations? And that is not to say that emotions play no role in decision-making or life. And that is not what I'm advocating. You just don't want your decisions or your thinking to be driven by your emotions. You want to drive them. There was a study, I think, 10 or 15 years ago, and somebody had been in a car accident and they lost all emotional capability. And you would think that person would be the most rational thinker, the most rational decision maker in the world. It turns out, A, they weren't. They weren't that better at decisions than most of us. And B, they had no meaning in life. It was just sort of void of connection. And I think, so we don't want to eliminate emotions, but we almost want to have a continuum between emotional decision making and rational. And where are we on that continuum? And so if you're making a financial decision, you probably want to be skewing towards rational. And if you're making a relationship decision, probably want a little bit more emotion in that. You want more passion and more livelihood. So it's recognizing that emotions can serve us, but they can also get in our way. And then how do we switch out of scenarios where they are in our way and we might not know it? So the common advice that everybody gets is, well, when you're angry, don't make a decision. The world doesn't work that way. And you can't recognize when you're angry a lot of the time anyway, because you're so in the moment.
Yeah.
And all the books are like, teach yourself to like recognize when your palms get sweaty or your face gets red and your heartbeat goes up. And if you practice that, you can do it fairly effectively, but it only works 20 to 30% of the time. What are we supposed to do for the other 70% of the time? And I think that slowing down our thought process when it matters is really key. And we can do that through environment or process. So, for example, if your automatic rule is, I'm going to write out any decision that is of consequence, any decision with a high failure cost, that automatically takes you out of emotional mode and puts you into rational mode. So when I think about this, it's when I think of another continuum, high cost of failure, low cost of failure. So when something is a high cost of failure, that means if I'm getting it wrong, it has an enormous cost to me. I want to slow down my thought process and I want to have a procedure around those decisions. The biggest risk when things have a high cost of failure is going too fast and making a mistake. But when it has a low cost of failure, the biggest risk is going too slow. And so I don't want to have a process, and I'm okay making an emotional decision around those. If I have to, I'd prefer not to, but I still am okay with that because it doesn't cost us. So just having that one centering question allows you to take two different paths and reach two different outcomes with your thought process.
Correlating to two facts, Jeff Bezos said that as you grown up as a CEO, you make lower number of decisions, but decisions with higher impact. So that's why you need to zoom out. And I fully agree. And I recognize the value of the moment of pause. Internally in VTEX, we call this the moment of pause. Sometimes you need just pause, think, revisit, regroup, and then execute. And the second one that I connect to this is a book called Extreme Ownership from Joko.
Yeah.
That he says that you need to have the capability of zoom out and then zoom in again.
Totally.
I heard that you wrote the book for you.
Yeah.
And that the book that we are seeing today, and I will ask the production to put the book in the screen, actually it's the third edition of the book. It's not the first and not the second.
It's the first one to get published.
The first one that's got published
3 times. The first time I wrote the book, I didn't even show my editor because I thought it was so bad. The second time I was like, playing around with this, and she was like, "You're not there yet." And so this is the third edition, like the third rewrite of it from scratch. And it didn't take that long. The last edition just sort of flowed pretty quickly. Once you figure out the structure and what you want to say, I think it came out really good. And I wanted to make it the most useful, practical book on decision-making that exists in the world. So I wanted to get rid of almost all theory and just go with what works. How do we learn from or master the best of what other people have figured out about this? But it was a distillation of my career because I had spent years learning from Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger and all these outside sources and like applying them in a fast-paced intelligence environment. I was applying, structured thinking. I was applying inserting a space or pause. So if I can do that in an intelligence agency that is 100% mission focused and driven by global events, I think we can do it anywhere. And I sort of took everything that worked for me and I put it in this book, and so many people have found it useful. I think, I've gotten over probably 20,000 emails now at this point from people ranging from I broke up with my partner because I read your book and I realized it was inertia, to you've changed my life, to I wish I would have had this earlier, to I now use this every day as a guide to help me.
Did you expect that kind of success so fast?
No, I mean, I feel very fortunate that people find it useful. I mean, my only goal with this was writing it for myself. And then when I decided to publish it for other people, I just wanted people to find it useful, whether it was 10 people who found the book useful or 1,000. I mean, I've been blessed that we're several 100,000 in now, but I think it's just, how do I write something that connects with people and shows them in a different way than ever been talked about? Most books on thinking talk about probability trees and sort of like expected value. And nobody in the real world that I ever talked to ever did any of that. Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, they don't do that stuff on a daily basis. They do it maybe mentally, but it's not precise. It's not about a calculation. It's about an exercise of thinking in first and second and third order about, if I do this, then what happens? And then what? And how do I position myself?
Do you have an example of today's companies that apply these in a really good way that you can share the case here with us?
Well, Capital One brought me in to speak to them, and they've started applying a lot of what we talk about in clear thinking internally. And I think that it gives you a language and a vocabulary, and it allows you to talk to your teams. So it allows you at an individual level, or allows them to delegate. So if it's a low cost of failure decision, I don't want to see it. When you talk about the CEO role, all of those decisions are almost high cost of failure by default. And so things should slow down a little bit by the time they get to the CEO. Only the problems that other people couldn't solve make it up to the top. And then the flip side is, on a team, one of the things that you're trying to assess, whether you're a team leader or a manager or director or whatever your position is, who can make decisions and who can't? How do I identify talent? Well, the way to identify talent in decision making is to let people make decisions. And most of the time we're such control freaks, and I'm in favor of micromanaging, don't get me wrong, but we're such control freaks, we want to make all the decisions. Then we become a bottleneck. But if you delegate the 50% below decisions that are low cost of failure to your team and other people, and then you set up a monthly or sort of quarterly meeting. What decisions did you make? How did you think through these decisions? Walk me through your judgment. I can identify who can make decisions in an organization and who's ready for more responsibility and who's not. And I can do that through about 3 months of work. And I think that we just don't take advantage of this opportunity. And you can even go further. And I think one of the things they started doing as a result of my talk there was keeping decision journals. So when you make a high cost of failure decision, you write it out and then you share it with the team. And the sharing wasn't, I don't know how they've implemented at this point, but it wasn't about critiquing at the start. It was about learning from other people. And once you get to a certain level of trust, then you can actually critique and say, oh, here's your blind spot. Because if you think about decision making, the source of all bad decisions is blind spots. And so how do we remove our blind spots? If the 5 of us were playing poker right now, and I could see everybody else's hand, how often am I going to play my hand poorly? Never. Why? Because I have complete information. It doesn't mean I'm going to win, because you could still have a better hand than me, but it means I'm not going to make any mistakes. And so when I think about decision making, the best way to convey this is, how do we remove our blind spots, but how do we just add more information? And that is remove. You're never going to completely remove your blind spots, but if I can see one more person's hand or even a card, well, then all of a sudden I have more information. And with that information, I can make better decisions.
The 4th principle of VTEX is we go deep as needed.
Yeah.
So it's the world is changing really fast. But if you don't go deep to make the decisions, you might incur in just kind of
that is such an important point, because most people just coast, right? And they coast on the summary of something, and they want to be an expert at something without doing the work that expertise requires. Expertise requires that you're in the details, you know the nuances, you know when something works and you know when something breaks. And I think so often we just want the gist of things and then we think we're an expert. It's kind of like if we pulled out a recipe book right now and we went back to your house and we cooked dinner and I cooked it perfectly, well, you wouldn't tell the difference between me and the chef. But if something went wrong, instantly the chef would be able to taste it and be like, "It's too much salt in here. Your oven was off. You didn't stir it frequently enough. You've skipped," and they would know that because they've done the work. And I think we need to do the work. We need to pick and choose where we want to be an expert and where it's okay for other people to be an expert, or we can sort of skim on the top, but don't delude ourselves into thinking we're an expert in areas that we're not.
There is one name that I believe both of us are a big fan, because you quote them twice, Charles Munger. He said something that the main attribute in a company for them to invest is what he called enormous insight.
Yeah.
If they have enormous insight, extraordinary insight, they can decide to go big or not in one specific company. And I believe the world that's going to be faster with AI, actually the weight of the decisions will be perceived in a way also faster than was before. So the right decision is even more important in this moment than was 10 years ago, because the time that you need to make it flexible was okay if you did mistake. But today, if you do mistake, it's just very, very difficult to move back the boat to the where you need to go. So
two comments on that. One, slowing down your process doesn't mean actually going slower. And I think that it's interesting in how you structure it.
To clarify.
Because people think that when I say this, they're like, oh, you just want to go slow. I'm a huge believer in velocity, but velocity also means that you need to get the direction right and then quickly course correct if it's not right. And I think that you can make a decision, and then the idea, like a lot of companies make a decision and then they keep going. They ignore evidence when it's not working, or when it is working, they sort of blind themselves because they want to be guided to it. And I think you need to decide with speed, but you also need to set out clear parameters at the beginning. How will we know this decision is being on the route to being successful? So not only end of sort of like, here's the end state, but what are the indicators along the way that it's working? And then you conversely, and almost nobody does this, but it's so valuable. We used to do this at the intelligence agency. And since I've talked about it everywhere, a lot of people have started doing it. But what are the indicators that it's not working? And that'll empowers everybody on your team, from the most junior staffer to the most senior, to be like, hey, we said this metric should be within this range. It went outside of that range. Let's have a conversation. Because often you're not going to get the tactic right to get to the destination. You know where you want to go, but you have to quickly course correct and adjust, just like a sailor with blowing wind. And I think that there's a huge element to organizations that move really fast, but part of moving fast and accurately is that you're constantly changing your direction when you're getting sort of information that indicates you're not on the right path.
Perfect. We are overdue on time here. A brief message for everybody that are listening to us, that are facing tough moments because they are seeing like a big geopolitical kind of nightmare. For where you look in the world, we do have some level of crisis, kind of mismanagement in policies. There was an actor that was United States that used to be the balance, but recently this balance was a little bit loosened. So the volatility in the world will not ease and will keep like that. So do you believe in a world where this is a new normal? Or do you still believe we can come back to 4 years ago, where the interest rate was in 0.5, 0.25%, where the money was like a vast? What to expect to the next years?
I think my view of this is that the past 20 years has been the aberration, not the norm. And I think what we're seeing today is more the norm than the aberration. And so expecting it to go back to the aberration, it might or might not. I wish I knew the answer to that, but expecting interest rates to stay at historically low rates is a recipe for disaster. I think you have to prepare for a world where that is one possible future. But the idea behind positioning, which we talk about in the book, is preparing, not predicting how the world's going to look, but preparing for multiple possible scenarios. And I think the message here, though, that is optimistic is there's always something you can do, no matter what time of day it is, no matter where you are at in your life, no matter what situation you were born into. There's always something you can do right now in this moment to put yourself in a better position for tomorrow. You just have to take control of what you're doing right now. And with the access to AI, it's really made a lot more competition for people, because now everybody in the world can compete. And I look at this, my son, I was talking to him while I was on the airplane flying here, and I'm like, this is incredible, right? I'm flying in the air. I have access to 1,000 employees. They don't complain. They work 24/7, and they're called GPUs. And they do whatever I tell them to do. And they get better every single month.
Yeah.
And they're getting better at like 20% rate. So like in that world, I can do anything. I just have to, I don't need permission. I can just go do it.
Yeah. So thank you so much. Let's thank this episode sponsored by PayPal, our partner for a long time in VTEX. Thank you for coming to Brazil. More and more people like you that comes here and can translate what you saw here. It's our kind of mission to do so. So thanks.
Thank you for having me.